The city of Megiddo played a prominent role in the history of the ancient Near East. Strategically located at the mouth of the Nahal Iron Pass, Megiddo controlled access to the road that linked Egypt with Mesopotamia and Anatolia, the most important trade and military route of that time. Megiddo is the only site in the land of Israel mentioned in the records of all Near Eastern ancient powers, and was one of the most fought-over cities in the region. The first fully recorded battle in history in which Pharaoh Thutmose III's army faced a coalition of Canaanite kings took place here in 1479 BCE. Megiddo is also mentioned in many biblical narratives. Its king was one of the Canaanite rulers defeated by Joshua. It is listed among the cities built by King Solomon, and it was the site where two Judahite kings, Ahaziah and Josiah, met their deaths. For millions of Christians, Megiddo is the Armageddon of John's Revelation, where the forces of good will defeat the forces of evil in the final battle at the end of days.
From the 21st century, El Megiddo takes us back to the dawn of human history. People first settled here 7,000 years ago, building their home in caves in the bedrock. Since then, for thousands of years, a central city existed here continually, experiencing all types of historic reversals. The city of Megiddo was destroyed 25 times by waves of conquerors, which surged over it and rebuilt it 25 times. The city's remains are found on the site's 25 levels, an eternal memorial to humanity's will to exist and an everlasting witness to the war and destruction accompanying human history. Perhaps that is the reason why Megiddo was chosen to serve as an eternal symbol of hope for the future. According to Christian tradition, right here the most important battle for man will take place in the last of days, the final battle. In the New Testament, the Apostle John predicts that at Megiddo, or as it is also known, Armageddon, the final battle to end all destruction and persecution will take place. The cruel wars which took place here during the thousands of years resulted from Megiddo's unique strategic location. It controls the most important part of the road running along the coast called Via Maris by the Romans, leading from Egypt in the south to Mesopotamia in the north. Whoever controlled the city controlled this central artery. Canaanite, Egyptian, Assyrian, Babylonian, Persian, and of course, the kings of Israel, led by Solomon and Ahab, all fought over it and over the city, and they all left memorials to their power and glory in Megiddo. The city of Megiddo knew not only wars, but cultural and spiritual development and the eternal longing of man for God. A prayer structure was discovered in the city from the Canaanite period, dating back to the year 5000 BCE. The people of the city prayed continually for thousands of years in the very same spot. 17 holy structures were built one on top of the other during various periods. The most impressive is a large round altar built of unhewn stone dated 2700 BCE. The city's name, Megiddo, appears in early written material from the 15th century BCE in documents of the Egyptian pharaoh Thutmose III, describing his military campaigns and conquests in the land of Israel. In a letter found at Tel El Amarna, dated in the 14th century BCE, the governor of Megiddo, Biridia, writes to his Egyptian king, "I have heard the words of my king, my lord, my son, and I shall defend Megiddo, city of kings, day and night." A beautiful treasure of ivory pieces was found in one of the rooms in Biridia's palace, not far from the gate of the walled city. The Israelites reached Canaan after 40 years of wandering in the desert. After a quick conquest, Megiddo fell and became a part of the lands of the tribe of Manasseh. King David conquered the city at its 16th level, which had been built on the ruins of 15 previous layers. The city reached the height of its glory in the period of the Israelite kings Solomon and Ahab. This was the best fortified of all cities built by King Ahab, and he chose it to be one of the 3 seats of government in his kingdom. He continued to develop and build the city. Proof of this remains to this day. The great city gates, the most beautiful ever discovered. 2 stables for 450 of his horses. 2 palaces, in one of which lived the governor appointed by the king. The public granary, from which food for all the citizens was distributed. There were 2 sets of stairs, one for going up and one for going down. The arched roof that protected the grains from sun and rain caved in during the course of the years. The most impressive discovery, its sophistication and construction technique astounding to this day, is the waterworks built for the city by King Ahab. The city had a real problem. Its great walls protected it during siege, but its water sources were in a cave at the foot of the hill outside the walls. How would they get drinking water while the enemy besieged the city? The solution was obtained by means of complicated but effective technology. Inside the city, a shaft was dug. From its bottom, a horizontal tunnel 30 meters long was excavated in the direction of the spring and at the same height. From now on, the citizens of the city could utilize the water that flowed outside the city without leaving the safety of the walls. In order to conceal and to protect the water from enemies, the external entrance to the cave was blocked up and the wall camouflaged with rock and sand. Many kingdoms came and went in Megiddo. The kingdom of Israel was conquered by Assyria, and after them came the Persians. In the 4th century BCE, Megiddo was abandoned and never resettled. All that is left are the remains of 4,000 years of human settlement and the apocalyptic prophecies, mainly Christian, which have memorialized its name in human culture as the arena of the great battle in the last of days. That is why the historic meeting between the President of Israel and Pope Paul VI took place in 1964 here at Megiddo, known as Armageddon. For 2,000 years, not only Megiddo lay in ruins, but also the entire area. 2 more battles took place here in this century. The British General Allenby routed the Turkish army at the end of World War I. The British reinforced their rule in the country, and General Allenby was named Lord of Armageddon. 100 years ago, the valley surrounding the city, called the Jezreel Valley, was brought back to life when Jewish pioneers returned to revive the land. They built cities and kibbutzim round the remains of the past. During Israel's War of Independence in 1948, more battles took place here which ended with the defeat of the Arab forces. At the end of the war, a kibbutz settled at the edge of the Tell, which took the historic name of the city, Megiddo. Its founders were survivors of the Holocaust who had come to find a new future alongside the historic remains. In the vicinity of the Tell, there are other interesting sites to visit, all under the auspices of the National Parks Authority, which is also responsible for Tell Megiddo. Beit Sha'arim and its archaeological discoveries, the synagogue found at Beit Alpha with its unique mosaic floor, the antiquities at Beit Sha'an now being excavated, Mayan Chavod, and Gan HaShlosha. The National Parks Authorities wishes you a pleasant tour.
The Valley of Jezreel is the boundary between Samaria to the south and Galilee to the north. Even today, as in ancient times, this area is the most fertile agricultural land in Palestine, which is reflected in the name Jezreel, which means God sows. In ancient times, this area had great strategic value as well, since the Jezreel-Esdraelon plain was the only east-west access between the coast and the Jordan Valley. Not only traders used these routes. Palestine was located on a narrow strip of land between Egypt to the south and the great civilizations to the north. As a result, through history, it became a corridor for invading armies bent on conquest, all of which had to funnel through Jezreel. Since this was also the most level land in the area, Jezreel-Esdraelon became a favourite site for battles. Although the area was controlled in the early biblical era by the Canaanites, equipped with chariots, Gideon managed to defeat the Midianites and the Amalekites here. The area was in Israelite hands by the time of Solomon, who fortified the ancient fortress of Megiddo to guard the pass. It was on the plains of Jezreel that Jehu's army defeated the armies of Jezebel, beginning a bloodbath in the northern kingdom that would have consequences for years. And it was at Megiddo that King Josiah was killed in a fateful attempt to block Egyptian armies from using the pass to march north to lend aid to Assyrian armies trapped by the Babylonians. In the 1930s, a team of archaeologists from the University of Chicago's Oriental Institute uncovered a massive six-chambered city gate at the Great Mound of Megiddo. The excavators assigned the gate to the period from 1000 to 800 BCE. They ascribed the construction of the gate to King Solomon. In the 1950s and 60s, excavations at Hatzor and Giza revealed city gates that were virtually identical to the Megiddo gate. Not only did they have the same plan, but their dimensions were very similar. All three gates were constructed of the same material, well-dressed ashlar stone blocks, well matched and carefully laid out. Each gate had 6 chambers, and at the outer corners were 2 towers that joined the city wall. Based on both the archaeological evidence and the biblical evidence, scholars unanimously concluded that all 3 gates had been constructed by King Solomon, who had obviously used the same royal architect at all 3 sites. The northern stables with stone mangers. Excavations at Megiddo have uncovered many evidences of horses, including stables and mangers, feeding troughs for animals. The capacity of the northern stables was about 300 horses altogether. Megiddo was once one of the garrisons of King Solomon's chariot corps. First Kings says, and Solomon gathered chariots and horsemen. He had 1,400 chariots and 12,000 horsemen, whom he stationed in the chariot cities. The late Bronze Age and Iron Age palace of King Solomon, overlooking the Jezreel Valley. The thick ashlar walls date to the Israelite period. Archaeologists date the palace to the time of King Solomon or King Ahab. The Tell or Mound of Megiddo holds in its slopes 25 layers of civilization unearthed by the archaeologists, documenting every period of the ancient history of the land of Israel. Megiddo exited history at the end of the Israelite period. This area served as a focus of worship for over 2,000 years, from the early Bronze through the Iron One periods. University of Chicago excavation section revealed a series of temples built one on top of the other. The Megiddo expedition, led by a team from Tel Aviv University, uncovered an additional temple unique in the Levant, in its monumentality and the thousands of sacrificial animal bones found in and around it. The foundations of this palace, first investigated by Y. Yedin in 1960, are presently being excavated by the Megiddo expedition. The edifice was apparently laid out as a Beit Hilani, northern Syrian palace, whose architecture included a monumental porticoed entrance and a large central ceremonial hall. The first excavations at Tel Megiddo were directed by Gottlieb Schumacher on behalf of the Deutsche Palästina Verein between 1903 and 1905. After the excavating the Tempelberg, Temple Fortress, in the eastern section of the mound, Schumacher dug a 25-metre wide trench running north to south across the mound. The remains of several monumental buildings, as well as burial chambers vaulted in fine stone corbelling, were exposed in the trench. A public grain silo from the time of King Jeroboam II, 8th century BCE. The silo had a capacity of 450 cubic metres. Straw found between the stones attests to the function of the installation. Southern Lookout. An elaborate ashlar-built palace stood near the southern edge of the mound. A monumental entrance, the only visible remains still standing, led to the courtyard. Like the northern palace, this edifice may have been built along the lines of a northern Assyrian Bit Hilani. One interpretation dated its construction to King Solomon, 10th century BCE, whereas another one post-dates it to Ahab's reign, 9th century BCE. The southern stables, 5 units, could accommodate 150 horses. As in the northern complex, each unit consists of a rectangular building divided into 3 sections by 2 rows of alternating pillars and troughs. It seems that the Northern Kingdom established a major horse breeding and training centre at Megiddo in the 8th century BCE, and this was apparently one of the reasons for its prosperity. Assyrian records from the 9th and 8th century BCE praise Israel's skills in chariotry. An Assyrian monolith inscription describing the Battle of Karkara, 853 BCE, states, I, Shalmaneser III, departed from Elgana and approached Karkara. I destroyed Karkara. He, the king of Hamath, brought along to help him 1,200 chariots of Adad Eori of Damascus, 2,000 chariots from Ahab the Israelite. There were 2 major springs at Megiddo, as well as many smaller ones. These were the waters of Megiddo mentioned at Judges 5 verse 19. Of the big springs, one was on the left just inside the driveway leading to the visitor's centre, but it is covered today. The other must once have been just northwest of the upper mound. The first people to settle Megiddo must have seen it on the surface. Over the centuries, as the water table dropped, they kept having to dig down after it. In the Middle Bronze Age, that's 2000 to 1550 BCE, in order to reach the spring, they had to descend the slope and cut back beneath the mound. Such a system was untenable in a stage of siege. At some point, the people of Megiddo dug a shaft to the spring from inside the city. Because the spring was under the slope, a shaft that began directly over it would not have been safe. The place was chosen at a point inside the wall, but as close to the source as possible. In 732 BCE, the Assyrian king Tiglath-Pileser III conquered the northern parts of the Kingdom of Israel and annexed them to Assyria. In the Assyrian period, 732 to 630 BCE, Megiddo became the capital of the province of Megiddo. The Assyrian city was laid out according to a new orthogonal planning, unknown to the region up to that time.
שמיים קליע, הקרא במים עליותיו, הסמבים רכובו, המהלך על כנפי רוח, עושה מלאכיו רוחות, משרתיו ואש לוהט, יסד ארץ על מכוניה, בלטימות עולם ועד.
Tiberias, Tiberia in Hebrew, is an Israelite city on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee. Established around 20 CE, it was named in honor of the second emperor of the Roman Empire, Tiberius. Tiberias has been held in great respect in Judaism since the mid-2nd century CE and since the 16th century has been considered one of Judaism's 4 holy cities, along with Jerusalem, Hebron and Safed. In the 2nd to the 10th centuries, Tiberias was the largest Jewish city in the Galilee and the political and religious hub of the Jews in the land of Israel.
Hummus, Bitterbrot.
Tiberias, Tiberia in Hebrew, is an Israelite city on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee. Established around 20 CE, it was named in honor of the second emperor of the Roman Empire, Tiberius. Tiberias has been held in great respect in Judaism since the mid-2nd century CE, and since the 16th century has been considered one of Judaism's 4 holy cities, along with Jerusalem, Hebron, and Safed. In the 2nd to the 10th centuries, Tiberias was the largest Jewish city in the Galilee and the political and religious hub of the Jews in the land of Israel.